Bentley here, good evening to you. On behalf of the Calgary Climate Hub, I welcome you to A Climate of Change, the Hub's livecast exploring with thought leaders from across North America what these wildly unprecedented times mean for addressing the climate crisis here in Alberta, how to create the fast, fair, and impactful change we need. In the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge that we live, work, and play on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Tsuut'ina, the Yaqtsi-Nakota Nations, the Métis Nations of Region 3, and all people who make their home in the Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta. Follow-up to the land acknowledgement, I'll just say that any global shift that does not include a just transition for the world's BIPOC, youth, economically disadvantaged, as well as communities from transitioning industries sets itself up for failure. This effort requires buy-in from everybody, which means historically underrepresented voices need a seat at the table now more than ever. I also want to thank our brand new sponsors for tonight's show, SkyFire Energy, who's supported us for a number of things in the past, Go Electric, used electric vehicles, and Solar Homes Inc. We'll talk a little bit more about them at the tail end of the show. But for now, on with the show. In the fall of 2021, heading into our municipal elections, the Calgary Climate Hub, along with a few great partners, commissioned some polling that revealed rapidly changing attitudes for Calgarians as it relates to climate change. A key realization is that a strong majority of us not only don't want to get left behind as the world transforms its energy systems, but given our history in the energy world, Calgary can and should be leaders in this. Since then, a historic climate emergency declaration has been made and passed by City Council, and many well-established stakeholders like the Calgary Chamber of Commerce agree and are throwing their support behind our move to net zero. So that's it. We have a shared goal, and we're all going to need to get there together. The next few Climate of Change shows will be honing in on some of the key components or solution sets in the net zero transition. I think it's fair to say there's no bigger piece than the focus of tonight's show, which is electrification, though maybe one of my guests will correct me on that. According to the Resources for the Future, electrification refers to the process of replacing technologies that use fossil fuels, so coal, oil, natural gas, with technologies that use electricity as a source of energy. So this is decarbonizing the grid. This is heat pumps instead of furnaces. This is solar panels. It's electric cars. It's wind. It's geothermal. It's more. We have a power panel of Alberta experts lined up for later in the show, but I want to start with the Hub's own board member, Robert Tremblay, who's one of the leaders of our effort to create a series of one-pagers to aid City Council as they formulate their important upgrade to their climate resilience strategy. Hey there, Rob. Welcome to A Climate of Change once again.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
So, yeah, sorry, what were you going to say?
No, just saying thank you.
Fair enough. So just one sort of question here. I was thinking about it today that electrification and net zero transition, you could almost say it's synonymous, but there are other pieces. You know, there's densification. Just transition is its whole thing as well. But how central do you think electrification is to the net zero transition?
Yeah, I think it's very central. Like, I think people will talk about different pathways to net zero, and I think the one that's the most prominent right now is electrification, or lots of times I'll hear it called electrify everything. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of two steps. You make your electricity clean, like decarbonize your electricity, and then you electrify as many things as possible. So the big ones being vehicles and home heating and buildings.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe just tell us a little bit about what the I should mention that Rob is the co-chair of our prolific net zero node that is doing some great work and trying to work with the city to aid our transition to net zero. But Rob, what can you tell us about the one pager initiative?
Yeah, so I think it kind of started when we kind of formed as a group. We had kind of some activities we wanted to take on. The initial reason for forming the group was to try to get the city to commit to net zero, and that was sort of a continuation of what we'd been pushing for in the municipal election. And fortunately, we had a really great council elected on the municipal election night, and we were able to get that net zero commitment really fast from the city. So with that, we kind of moved to how can we implement net zero and how can we make sure it's good. So we in our group, we had kind of different people look and kind of research different elements of the climate strategy from 2018. So that strategy is getting updated in June, and we see that update as a significant lever the city can pull to kind of get itself on a grid path to net zero. So since everybody kind of researched different topics, what we moved forward from that was people then started to write down what they thought the city needed to do, what was good in the plan, what needed to be specified or kind of moved up. And that took the form of these one pagers. So I think, trying to remember exactly, I think we have 7 or 8 right now. So we have topics like electricity, personal vehicles, cycling, transit, new and existing buildings, et cetera. And we'll use these to engage the city's climate team. We've already met with most of the council, I think 9 out of 14 councillors. So we'll kind of continue to engage on council with these. And it's our hope that once the draft comes out, a lot of what we're asking for will either have already been in there from the get-go. The city's climate team's doing a really good job, or the city will be like, like, you know, maybe if this is something the climate community is pushing for, maybe we should include this.
So specifically with the electrification one pager, what can you, is there anything there that you can sort of set the table for tonight's show that you feel like you know, the city you think is really important that the city of Calgary puts into its plan?
Yeah. So electrification or electrify everything it's everything. So it's a big topic. So I think there's a few different topics that kind of fit under the sort of umbrella of electrification. So we have one that is just focused on electricity and decarbonizing electricity. So the city or the municipal level of government doesn't traditionally have a lot of levers to pull over electricity. So Calgary is unique in that it owns its own municipal utility that generates a lot of the electricity Calgary uses. So we have a one pager that's mostly focused, I'd say, on what the city can do via its ownership of ENMAX to clean up the grid, and a few other ways that it can influence provincial and federal policymakers to also pass the needed policies. So an example is the federal government has recently mandated the Minister of Natural Resources and the Minister of Environment and Climate Change with coming up with the policy to make sure that all electricity in Canada is net zero by 2035. So, for example, one of the actions is just to support the federal government and provincial governments on implementing that. Another thing in electricity is rooftop solar. So we found that there's studies out there that show that rooftop solar could provide around up to 23% of our current electricity demand. As we electrify, though, an important aspect to consider is that we'll probably be increasing our electricity demand. So depending on kind of how much electricity usage we have in the future, we have it between 8 to 23% of Calgary's future electricity demand could be satisfied with rooftop solar. So, you know, that's no joke. We need to deploy as much as we can. And then kind of the flip side of that equation is getting things to use electricity. So electric vehicles are a big one. One of the main ways we see the city supporting that is through making sure that new buildings are EV ready and making sure that people already living in Calgary have spots to charge their EV. One kind of phrase I like to use with it is it needs to be as convenient or more convenient than gassing up. So, you know, for some people, I think it's already is that way. If you can just plug it in your garage and you're good to go, then that probably already is more convenient than gassing up. But for someone like me, for example, I live in a basement suite and just have access to street parking. So I'm looking to get an EV this year, but I think it will be kind of a challenge for me, and I'm up for the challenge, but it'll be a challenge for me to figure out how to keep that charged with just street parking. And I don't think we can expect ordinary people to be up to that challenge. People are generally pretty busy and looking for things to be easy. So I think we need to make it so it's very simple for people. And the topic I'd like to ask some of the panelists tonight is electrifying buildings. I think technologically we have kind of some of the solutions we need, technologies like heat pumps or just like a resistive electric heating. But the main ways we've talked about that is more just in general ways to retrofit buildings. So I'm really curious to hear if some of the panelists have specific ways or stuff other jurisdictions are doing that is really good around deploying electrified heating.
And then as far as for our guests being able to, do you have an ask for our guests as far as contributing to the one pager? I know that you've probably got a lot of content in that one pager already, but is there some help that you could be asking for from them?
Yeah, so we had planned on getting them out last week, but stuff gets a little crazy, and it's always easy to be like, oh, this person should look at it, this person should look at it. So they have not been sent out yet, but I'd say they're kind of 90% ready to go or more. So they are pretty close to being done. But I think if the panelists would like to kind of look each one of their kind of respective topics over, then yeah, I think that's a great help. You can never have too many eyes on it, unless you never produce it, and then it kind of defeats the purpose. But
right. So my final question before we go to the panelists is just, if we have some regular Calgarians listening right now, how can they become a part of this?
Yeah, so if you're a hub member, then you can volunteer with the team. So if you reach out, our volunteer coordinator, Adria, she can hook you up with when we'll be doing our monthly meetings. And if you want to attend those, then I think we'll have plenty of work to do. The one pager sort of program we're doing is going to be wrapping up, but then that brings with it a whole new cycle of engagement. We have to engage the council team, the public, the media. So there'll be lots to do. Another thing we're looking at doing is having a day of action. So that'd be a day where we try to have as many people as possible meet with their councillors all on the same day, just kind of express, climate is important, net zero is important. We really would like to do that. So I think that will also be important, but also a lot of work to plan. So I think if anybody listening is interested in helping with that, I think definitely we could use the help.
Excellent. Okay. Well, we will move on to our panel, and we're going to keep Rob waiting in the wings because I think he's a very smart guy, and I'm happy to have him to help backstop me. So to begin with, I guess, as we said, recent polling reveals Calgary wants to show leadership on the net zero transition. So one of the big questions is, what kind of upgrades to our grid are we going to need? As well as how do we get charging units into our residences and buildings at the scale and speed that we need? So we're very happy to have along with us here tonight, the Pembina Institute Senior Analyst, Grace Brown. Grace Brown, welcome to A Climate of Change. I'll come back to you in a second there. Our other guest, or our second guest that we have tonight, is with the Electric Vehicle Association of Alberta, which represents nearly 2,000 Albertans that are passionate about owning, driving, and creating the right conditions for electric car or electric vehicle uptake right here in Alberta. And we're happy to have him on our panel this Wednesday night. And then full disclosure, one of our guests on tonight's show is actually the CEO of SkyFire Energy. So as you may or may not know, that's one of our sponsors. And so if that makes you raise an eyebrow and say, really, Bentley, you're going to have one of your sponsors on as your guest? And well, my answer is unreservedly and enthusiastically, you bet I will. SkyFire CEO David Kelly had the vision to start up a solar panel company in the heart of Canada's oil and gas land over 20 years ago. And since that time, SkyFire has become the biggest solar company in Western Canada. So you bet I want to know where this clean energy pioneer thinks we need to be headed in 2022. So welcome aboard, panel. I'm so happy to have you on board. I think maybe I'm going to start with David. Have you sort of always been waiting for this moment? Did you always know this was coming, that eventually solar was just going to like explode?
Yeah, it was always a dream that we'd see solar on every rooftop. We're at the point today where that grid parity, that magical grid parity that we were always seeking, has finally arrived. So today, solar on a residential rooftop is cheaper than grid power, and that's that was always the holy grail of the industry. Was let's make this more efficient, let's make it cheaper, let's install it better. And we've reached that point a couple of years ago, and with the number of programs federally and the upcoming SEEP program with the city of Calgary, I think it's just going to grow even more.
How big a piece, or a big a part, I guess you'd say, of the net zero solution do you think solar is?
I think it's a huge part. If you're going to build a net zero building, and that's a mandate in a number of jurisdictions, BC, net zero by 2032, net zero ready by 2032. Every building that's being built has to be net zero energy ready. At that point, you're looking at, I'm going to put solar on the mortgage for either commercial or residential building. It's going to deliver cheaper energy that I can get from the grid. So it's a no-brainer. And we've spent 20 years trying to figure out how to do it better and cheaper, and we're there. That's it's taken that long, and we've got projects under construction in Alberta that would have eaten up 5 times the worldwide capacity for building solar modules in a year that are being built here in Alberta on one location. It's the growth has been unbelievable.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to switch over to Grace for a second here and sort of ask you the same question, I guess. How much are things changing in the world of energy grids and car charging these days?
Well, I think that as far as charging goes, in general, people are getting a lot more excited about and aware of electric vehicles. If you're like me and you only watch the Super Bowl for the commercials, then you probably noticed the large amount of electric vehicle commercials that there were. So I think that shows a lot of mainstream acceptance and excitement around electrifying transportation. There was a KPMG survey actually that showed that 68% of Canadians and 54% of Albertans say that their next car will be electric, and that was their next purchase in 1 to 5 years. So we're not talking about like hypothetically in the future. So yeah, with all of this increased uptake and interest in EVs, we're going to need to do a lot of work in providing the infrastructure that's necessary to, to help people support their purchases and to make charging, what did Rob say, the same or easier as going to the gas station.
Mm-hmm. And then as far as, as far as the energy grid, we have historically had a very dirty grid, I guess you would say, a very carbonized grid where I think we're getting better. But what do you see coming down the pipe on that front?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think that, Alberta is phasing out coal in 2023, which is great. And so now I think that the main area of interest is, resisting the urge to dash to gas. I think that there's a lot of opportunity for utility scale renewable energy projects, wind and solar, rooftop, as David said as well. Alberta is very sunny and very windy. We have a lot of great resources here. So I think that like TransAlta is adding to its Canadian grid over 900 megawatts of renewable energy by 2025. So I think that's the kind of ambition that we need to make our grid greener and more sustainable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I guess, and so my next question, I'll go over to Andre Batiuk there. So how have things been changing for your members during this enormous transition that's been going on over the last few years?
As Grace mentioned, that study, and it's so neat to see the difference that a few years have made, because when I got involved with EVA in 2015, very few people thought EVs were going to take off. There was so much misinformation. The technology has advanced a lot since then. And to hear that a good portion of Canadians and Albertans are looking at EV in the next 5 years goes to show that the technology is where it needs to be. People are no longer scared away from the idea that they don't work in the cold, that they can't go to the mountains for a ski trip whenever they want without concern, range anxiety, all that. So I think it's just a super bright future for EVs.
Mm-hmm. So I guess, when we think about all of these, there's so much work to be done when it comes to this transition, and there's so many different, types of solutions that are available. So, like when I like with Dave, as far as like community versus scale or community solar versus utility scale and all of that, where do you see the most growth happening over the next few years?
On the electrical generation side of things, sorry?
Oh, I was asking David there, but by all means,
No, I will hand it off to him for sure.
yeah. If you want to fight it out, though, we can do
So,
it.
from a mass megawatt scale, we are going to see more built on the utility scale projects. Like I was mentioning, the Travers project is 746 megawatts of solar. Up until a couple of years ago, we were sub 100 megawatts in all of the microgen projects that have been built in Alberta. And you need both of them. You need utility scale to build for large projects, for driving down the cost of solar modules, for supplying large industrial loads. But you also need the residential solar because it's distributed. It allows people to participate in the energy market themselves. It allows people to own their own energy, and people are looking for that as being able to control their costs as well.
Yeah, and then as far as for the for electric vehicle uptake, is it more about community solar? As far as what's going to benefit the electric vehicle users, or
I think you're going to see charging stations built with a canopy, kind of like the background behind me. That was a 500 car parking lot that we assembled carports for on CP Rail site here in Calgary. It's the largest privately owned behind the meter project in Canada, I believe. It's 4.25 megawatts. There's a bit of ground mount as well as this large canopy. There's also EV charging that was part of that package. So we're going to see things like that happening. You see it in the US now, particularly where they were building canopies anyways for shading vehicles in the hot, sunny climates. This keeps the snow, the hail, and the sun off your vehicles, as well as making electricity. Parking lot's a perfect spot for it. It's unused, or it creates a dual purpose for the land as well.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that for decades now, about the fact that most parking lots, people only use the first 12 feet. There's once your vehicle's there, there's no use for it for any of that space up there, and
right.
That'll be a big change. I like what's been going on with the TELUS center there as well. But Grace, I want you to, maybe you can tell us a little bit about the project that you're working on right now as far as residential charging units.
Yeah, sure. So a project that I'm really excited to be working on right now at Pembina is a demonstration project for making electric vehicle charging more accessible to a wider range of people. So Rob mentioned earlier that that the city is, the Calgary Climate Hub is working on making new buildings EV ready, and this project is targeting existing buildings to make existing multi-unit residential buildings electrically upgraded so that they can handle the charging infrastructure that's going to be needed, and then also installing charging stations as they're needed as the need arises.
Yeah,
that way everybody, not just people who can afford to live in a new nice apartment, can have access to EV charging stations, or you can have one in your garage. This will make it a lot more accessible to a lot more folks.
Yeah, I know Andrew's membership there is very interested in that for sure. Rob, you had your hand up there for a second.
Yeah, I think I've had a few times that, if we were just at a bar, I feel like I would have jumped in. But I guess like on this topic, one question that's I don't know, in my head right now, but been thinking will be interesting to see how it plays out. But how big of a role do we think we see like public charging playing? So like my living situation, it's maybe not the most common, but I don't have access to like a parkade at all. So I've seen some cities they'll put out community kind of level 2, so like on street sides. Obviously, we're seeing level 3 chargers deployed. Do we think those will play a big role? And I guess if so, like, what do we think about level 2 versus level 3?
Well, I think we personally in EVA want to see the proliferation of level 3 at this point. There's certainly a good number of level 2 out there, but when you're talking someone that doesn't have access to home charging, going somewhere for several hours to top up at level 2 is a far different story than going to a level 3 and topping up while you go grab your groceries or something, and by the time you're done, the car's done as well. Of course, the challenge with that is the cost is significantly higher for those level 3 installations than it is for level 2. So there's going to be a mix for sure, but there's no easy solution for at-home charging when you don't have at-home charging. So it's going to be one of the challenges we see going forward.
So question basically for anybody who wants to jump in here, what do you think some of the economic opportunities are going to be for Calgarians over the next 10 years as it relates to the net zero transition and specifically electrification?
Well, I think to address the charging aspect for the electric vehicles, I think there's an opportunity in retrofitting existing buildings that, maybe their electric system is at capacity already, is introducing a second service to the building with designated EV charging spots in the parkade, if it's an apartment building, and charging for that as a third party. We'll go and install the EV charging in the building, and whoever's using it pays for it. So I think that's a business opportunity for somebody.
Yeah, absolutely. What about as far as the transition work that has to go on with the grid? Is that something that we see an opportunity for Calgarians to capitalize on, Grace?
Yeah, I think that holistically, that evidence has shown that solid climate plans lead to good clean energy jobs. There was a Clean Energy Canada report that found that under Canada's current climate plan, we'll add like 208,000 jobs plus in clean energy sectors by 2030. Pembina Institute report found that decarbonizing Alberta's economy, and so all of the work that goes around that in the electric vehicle sector, in remediation of oil and gas sites, renewable energy, all of those things will add like 67,000 jobs in the province by 2030 as well. So I think that on the whole, there's a lot of opportunity to capitalize on the various facets of this whole decarbonization project and making a lot of good, solid jobs in the process. So Calgary has an opportunity to create a policy environment that's friendly to this movement, that incentivizes decarbonization, transmission, renewable energy, energy storage, demand side management, energy efficiency, all of those fun terms. And then maybe funding training programs so that people can get in on that as well.
Yeah, I'll just tack onto that too. Just to add a frame that I don't really hear talked about as often as I'd like. And so I think there's always with just transition, there's a lot of focus on how do we kind of replace the oil jobs from the oil sands, and a lot of the jobs that were in the oil sands through the kind of the last boom up till 2014, a lot of them were construction jobs, and they weren't operations jobs. And then those operations jobs are still there; the facilities still exist. And I think one of the things we need to talk about more with renewables, so a lot of these utility scale solar projects, for example, is a lot of the same companies that were doing oil sands construction, they're doing now solar and wind construction. So even for myself, like my background's engineering, and some of my first jobs were working up north at SAGD construction plants, but now I have friends that work for those same companies, and they're building solar plants in southern Alberta. So just a useful frame. And I think with some, I guess maybe one other thing to add on that is with some level of investment that we see projected in solar specifically, but also wind. And if you combine them all together, it's starting to get close to kind of what one large oil sands project would be. So I think we need to, in a way, start comparing it to the oil sands a little more and kind of explaining how that workforce is more malleable than we might think.
Sure. Yeah. And Andrew, does your membership talk about, a new wave of net zero related jobs?
The obvious ones on the electrician side, we need, there's going to be a fair number of houses, buildings, dwellings that need visits to install either simple chargers or more involved, multi charging setups for apartment buildings and that sort of thing. And when you get into power sharing and upgrading services. So there's going to be a bunch there. There's also been talk of folks that see the potential need for, replicating the gas station idea. Some gas stations are starting to add EV charging, but if they don't do it quick enough, could a third party come in and, usurp them, install the charging and install whatever makes the most sense for people to occupy their time while they're getting the charging done and bringing additional revenue to that location.
Mm-hmm. That's very interesting. You know what? I just saw somebody put, sorry, go ahead there, Dave.
Yeah, I was going to say the gas station model where you actually go to a place to charge or fill up your tank may go away because you're going to see places where you're going to have charging where you go. So whether it's at a restaurant, at a shopping mall, the gas station model was built because we needed a facility to store a big flammable tank of fuel. Don't need that with an electric car charging station. You can have it in your garage, you can have it at the shopping mall, you can have it anywhere really. So I think there may be a change in how we think about locating those charging facilities. Mm-hmm. The city's got most of their parking lots have EV charging already.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I'd really like to see with the city, I'd like to see them moving out a little bit more to kind of the publicly accessible areas. So I know they've started putting them at C-train stations, which I think is a good kind of first step. Some
of the leisure centers have them as well.
Yeah.
Southland Leisure Center just around the corner from me has 2 charging stations now, and they're paid for. Like they're a pay app charging station. So it's not a free city gives away electricity system. It's actually paid for, so which it should be.
Mm-hmm. So a question for the room here, as David mentioned at the outset, solar power is just becoming cheaper and cheaper. In fact, I think it's the cheapest energy on the planet right now. But we're still in a situation where, things like electric cars, things like solar panels, there's a number of questions in the chat that hopefully I can swoop up in one fell swoop and say that's too much swoops in one sentence, but and just say that folks really want to know how they can get these things paid for, and if a government is really serious about having its population take up these solutions, like if the climate change is a life and death situation, as we all know it is, then we're going to need a lot of help from the government to get a lot of this stuff in place at the scale we need. So what are some of the solutions that you're seeing that are working elsewhere, or big picture ideas that are going to help us make it so that these solutions are accessible to all Canadians?
I think the biggest change we can do, and it's coming, is building code change, where it's mandated the building is net zero ready or is net zero to begin with. BC's mandated step code net zero energy ready. I think it's step code 3 or 4 by 2032, which is coming up very quickly. I think Alberta's been very much slower to adopt that, but it's coming here as well.
And as an extension to that, if you're talking about condo buildings, we've had a number of members that were willing to foot the bill to install the electrical capacity to charge their vehicles, and the condo board denied it. Part of that is miseducation sometimes, but other parts is just for whatever reason they're not going to allow it unless something pushes them to allow it. And so if there can be regulation changes that work for the EV owner's benefit as opposed to the condo board's benefit in those kind of situations, that would be helpful.
Rob, you had a question there?
Yeah. So one thing, I think we're starting to talk about it a lot more with electrification, but still it definitely hasn't gotten the focus of electric vehicles, is building heating and heat pumps. And I think it's kind of an area where I feel like I understand the technology, or at least I think I do, but I really don't have a good grasp of what kind of the best in class policies are for trying to get this stuff deployed beyond kind of policies that generally support building retrofits, like the clean energy incentive program. So I'm wondering if kind of the room has anything that they really like that other cities are doing to make sure that buildings are electrified. And I guess I'm thinking mostly specific, new buildings, existing buildings.
I think that something that is overlooked a little bit is the importance of demand side management. So just regulatory and utility rate changes that incentivize demand side management programs. Heat pumps would be a good candidate for that, where it benefits the utility because then they can manage their loads. And then it also benefits the homeowners because they get a little bit of extra money, and then also they don't really have to do a whole lot to change the way that they use their equipment. So I think that better demand side management incentives would go a long way in increasing adoption of these electrified building technologies. Mm-hmm. The same could be used for EV charging too. There's a lot of interest in capabilities for vehicle to grid integration, so that you can use your fleet of residential cars, or school buses or city buses as a grid asset, instead of just looking at it as something that you have to manage. You can use positive management for that.
I know Electra in Ontario is doing a study where they, through their smart metering system, they're able to address the solar, storage battery, and demand side management, whether it's a hot water tank or air conditioning, and potentially also an in-home battery system, and able to shave peaks, distribute energy around as needed through their existing smart meter system. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that. We were talking about jobs. Well, trying to figure that modeling out, and we will struggle a little bit with our grid capacity if everybody goes electric for heating, charging vehicles, etc. But I think there's demand side management ways to do that without necessarily having to upgrade all of our wiring infrastructure in the cities. So there's opportunities there.
David, maybe you can speak to this, but my understanding in talking to people from utility companies is, we, as much as EVA would love to snap our fingers and have everyone go electric tomorrow, that's just not going to happen. There's a kind of a natural adoption curve to all these items that we're speaking of today. And the grid as we see it does have excess capacity on a kind of holistic level. There are certain pain points right near where you're going to be using the electricity, transformers and such, that may need the first level of change out. And some of that change out can happen over regular course of maintenance of those transformer units. But there's some comments in chat about, can the grid support it? And that's a complex question I can't entirely answer on my own, but it's not that it can't support it, I think, is the answer I can give. There is definitely an excess of electrical generation generally, and there are just a few pain points that will have to be dealt with on a kind of case by case, numerous case by case, but case by case basis.
I'll just jump in, Andrew, and just maybe even say what I think what you're saying, just like sharper. Like I think the whole premise of can the grid handle it is it's a stupid premise. We're transitioning to electric vehicles over a 30-year time frame. So like the federal government has policy that says, or they're going to have policy that says all new vehicles have to be zero emission, which is primarily electric, by 2035. And then with the idea of fleet turnover by 2050, it takes 15 years for the rest of those stragglers to kind of have to sell their cars or have them break down. But that's a 30-year time frame. Like if you look at the grid in 1930 and you look at it in 1960, it's a huge difference. And I don't know, to imagine that the grid is just going to remain static over the next 30 years is really silly. So I'm not saying, I wouldn't maybe say the person asking it is, I don't know. I think really a reframing is needed. I have a question from the chat. One of our hub members, Jim Sterling, has a really interesting question. I think mainly for Grace. I think if I remember correctly, about 20% of Alberta's electricity, it might even be more, comes from cogeneration plants at oil sands facilities. So he's asking, like, how do those get considered when we're talking about clean electricity or net zero electricity? Because if I remember about cogeneration properly, the oil sands facilities are creating steam, and that natural gas is being burned primarily for steam, and they're using the excess heat from that steam generation to do electricity. So yeah, how do those fit into clean electricity?
Yeah, I wish I had an answer for you on that, but I am not a part of the team that works on our oil and gas or cogeneration concerns, but I do know who to ask, and I can get back to you on that.
Excellent.
Absolutely.
And actually, that's a perfect segue for me, because we do have a very active chat going last night with lots of complex technical questions that I personally would be lost at the first turn. But we do have a lot of smart people on the show here tonight. And then we also, you can also go to the Facebook Live and post your questions there. And I invite my panel to go and check it out, and if you're able to contribute an answer here or there, or even just say hi, then that'd be wonderful. But we do go onto the Facebook after each show and try to respond to as much as we can, and when possible I can certainly take your question and send it along to these experts and see what we get out of it. A big question I want to make sure that I ask, and I'll ask each of you, is that the hub is laser focused on ensuring that the city of Calgary gets where it says it needs to be with the net zero transition. It's our raison d'etre is to influence climate action at the community and municipal levels. So what I want to ask each of you is, if you had city council in front of you right now, what do you think is the key thing they should know about your area of expertise, specifically as it relates to their plan to get to net zero?
I'll take off what Grace was saying earlier, and it's policies and building codes around charging in dwellings, new and used, would be a massive benefit if that got sorted out.
Did he sum that up pretty good for you there, Grace?
Yeah, I think actually going to the conversation that Andrew and Rob were having about the increased load on the grid, I think that we don't need to fear the load. I don't know if that's a thing. Maybe we can make that a saying, but also we can. I don't know. These resources that we're putting onto the grid are flexible, and so we need to start treating them as contributing more to the grid than just load. There's a lot of opportunities for smart demand side management, as I mentioned. Storage can provide black start capabilities in power outages, and then enabling vehicle to grid capabilities for EV charging makes it an extra asset. So yeah, you've got a lot of opportunities to make your grid more flexible. We are going to need to add some generation as we continue electrifying more things, but it's not as scary as it may sound.
Over to you, Dave.
So right now the city of Edmonton is paying a grant for solar so many cents a watt. I believe it's 45 cents a watt right now out of their local access fee, which is the city tax that you see on your bill. The city of Calgary is not. The city of Calgary has probably the best permitting process of any city in Canada. So we worked with the city, with NMAX, with the fire department, with the building department to come up with that probably 15 years ago. And so that's made the installation permitting process, or the soft costs, much better than most other places in Canada. So they've done that right. One of the other things is looking at the development guidelines for commercial buildings and homes. And when people are arranging streets, when people are designing development guidelines that say, you have to have a dormer on the roof to fit in architecturally with the community. Well, every time you stick an architectural doodad on a roof, you've now created less space available for solar. So we don't want our cities to look, like all slabby and solary, but managing those architectural guidelines that we see by the developers, typically not the city, to make solar more efficient and easier to install. And if we're having to put solar on a northeast facing slope to accommodate enough energy, that's not a great thing. We want to have streets oriented better. We want to have roofs oriented better.
I'll say, Dave, I used to roof before I went to university, and I definitely very much feel the less architectural doodads point. It's the bane of my existence for a little while.
Yeah.
One quick question I might ask you, Dave. So we've kind of talked about building codes specifying EV readiness. Do you think is there a role, or would you kind of like to see building codes mandate solar, or say, if you build a new building, it should come with solar?
It's coming under the STEP code, and there's certainly pushback from the developers and the builders, because it can add to the cost of the house. But in the long run, you've built a better product, you've built a more efficient product. It's going to cost the homeowner less over the life of that house than if you were to build, an old leaky house with single pane windows. So, we've got a precedent now for building better and better homes. Let's step it up a little bit. So, pardon the pun.
How fast I'm asking the room here, how fast do you think we're moving in relation to how fast we need to be moving to match the needs that are coming up? Did that make sense?
I think we could always move faster, but it's sometimes nice to benefit from other people's learned mistakes and lessons. A city could rush out and install level 2 chargers everywhere, which has some benefit, but at the expense of not looking at level 3 fast chargers, when the level 3 fast chargers have different and I might say better benefits. And some cities had done that in the past. And now, they've spent money and they're not too willing to spend more money on level 3. So by seeing that, they did that action and they got whatever results they got, and there were these challenges with those results, there is some benefit to not being first in the race sometimes.
Just adding on to that, Andrew, one of the things I think I was most excited to see in some of the municipal platforms was, I think it was Mayor Gondek who she had a point where she said she wanted to facilitate a level 3 charger within a 10-minute drive of every Calgarian. So that's something we're definitely looking for council to implement as soon as possible. So
yeah, I great to be doing that. I don't know if we need them yet. We've had an electric car for 4 years now, starting off with a little Fiat 500e city car. If you stretched, you could get to High River and charge up there and come back again. But now with a longer range EV, I rarely see people at the level 3 chargers at the Petro-Canada on Highway 22, at the flow charger at the Stony Nakota casino. So yeah, we need to start looking at that, but I don't think they need to be rolled out immediately, because I just don't see people using them at this point. People are charging at home.
But I think some of the reason you're not seeing them used is, unfortunately, people are avoiding buying EV because they don't have home charging. And it's kind of that chicken and egg issue of they won't get the EV because they can't charge at home, and they don't see enough level 3s. But there aren't level 3s because you don't see people using them, you know?
Yeah.
I
And try to buy an EV today.
That's a difficult trade.
You know, we put an early deposit down on an F-150 Lightning and had a horrible dealer experience. Also put a deposit down on a Hyundai Ioniq 5. Again, had a horrible dealer experience. So if I wasn't really keen to have another electric car, it would be very discouraging to be going out to a dealer today to try and buy one.
Well, I can't say anything about the lack of inventory. There are all sorts of issues and reasons for that.
And I understand that.
But EVA has actually started working with dealerships and doing training for their staff to get them aware of the pain points of the purchasing process, get them thinking different ways than they currently think. Because we've heard too many people say they've had painful experiences with dealerships and buying EVs.
And I don't know if it was just the EV, if it was just a painful dealer experience buying a car from a dealership. And that seems to be where we landed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think our thinking is just we need to remove as many barriers as possible for people to get EVs. So I'm like Andrew said, I'm not quite sure what we can do about the dealers, but I think having those charges there, even if they're not utilized to the point where they're economic, I think it's just important for removing those barriers. In the grand scheme of things, it's not that big a cost to get them out.
Andrew just mentioned a program that his organization is doing. That's the first I've heard of it, and I think that's a really cool thing that you're doing. I'm a Facebook member of EVA, but I'm not on track with everything that they're doing. I was really glad to hear that, but I also want to invite Andrew and the rest of the panel to if there's initiatives or things that you're doing that perhaps our audience could contribute to or be a part of. We have a very active and a smart audience. It never hurts the host of a show to compliment his audience, but in my case, I actually really believe it. I don't doubt it for 1 second. So, Andrew, are there other initiatives that EVA is working on that's worth talking about to our audience?
Well, I'll just expand on the dealer training a touch. And one thing we could ask for is if anyone has contacts, if you know someone working at a dealer, salesperson, manager, what have you, if you can get us in touch help us get in touch with them. We've had pretty good response from those we've reached out to, but some are still not too sure about this EV thing. And if they have their customers kind of pushing or their staff pushing to improve the experience, it only helps our cause. We haven't talked a lot about the dealer training. Is it something we're just piloting? We've done it with a few institutions, sorting out what works, what doesn't work, but the early feedback we've had has been very positive. There aren't other initiatives at the moment that we can involve your members in. Those will probably start picking up as we come out of the so-called COVID hibernation this summer. Summertime is when we tend to be the most active with events, gatherings, and initiatives. So we'll see what we can come up with.
Excellent. What about you, Grace? Is there something our audience can help you with the important work that you're doing?
Yeah, for sure. This isn't necessarily related to a specific program, I guess, but the election is coming up, and Canada has a goal to achieve a net zero electricity grid by 2035. So we are like 13 years away from that. That's something that we need to be doing, getting on now. So yeah, I would say, just ask all of the leading parties what their plan is to get to net zero by 2035 for the electricity sector, and just ask them all to have a credible grid decarbonization plan. I think that that's really important to start implementing now. And I guess related to my project, if I'm going to be selfish and plug my project, if you live in a condo or an apartment and you want some EV charging infrastructure, call your building manager and ask them what they're doing to keep up with electrification and charging infrastructure, and then maybe let me know, and then maybe I'll look into it.
Yeah, so maybe they could reach out via either the Pembina's Twitter or to the Pembina's email from the website, kind of thing.
Yeah, you can just click on me and then it will email me.
Okay, so this is another, I'm going to go over to Dave here shortly, but it's another thing where I feel like one of the reasons why I put the show together the way I did was because I'm hoping there's a lot of synergy here that can flow here, and I'm hoping that this isn't the last time that you are seeing each other on Zoom. And so I'm wondering if some of Andrew's membership might be able to help Grace in what she's trying to do, and of course Dave's knows everybody in the solar world as well. So maybe there's some opportunities here, and maybe there's more that we can tease out here. But Dave, do you have any specific asks for our audience or your other panelists or etc.?
Well, I think there is a perfect synergy, and it's strictly economics. I do a presentation where I take $100 worth of gasoline, I take $100 worth of grid power, and I take $100 worth of solar power. I'll drive a gas-powered vehicle, something comparable to a Tesla, because like a Lexus. And I haven't done it in a while, but it was around 900 kilometers. The Lexus will go on $100 worth of gasoline. It's probably far less than that today with the gas prices where they are. On Alberta grid power at 11 cents a kilowatt hour, a Tesla Model Y will go over 4,000 kilometers. And if you substitute that with a good grid power system, even at the residential scale, that car is going to go over 6,000 kilometers with a levelized cost of energy of about 7.5 cents. So we're going to see that transition, whether you like solar or not. If you want to drive cheapest dollars per kilometer, you're going to put solar on your rooftop and drive an electric car. Sort of encompasses all that we're talking about. Side benefit, we're going to pollute less. So it's, you look at strictly the economics, it makes absolute sense.
Yeah, it just becomes cheaper or easier and easier to make the economic case, and that has always been the game changer when that started to happen. I see a question here from Pat Letizia from Alberta EcoTrust. She's asking Andrew whether you're working on, or I guess maybe we'd say aware of any other incentives or subsidies for EVs coming out of the province.
That's something we continue to talk to government officials about. Nothing to say at this point. Our current political climate is not super conducive to that, but you never know.
All right, and I got a comment in here from Robin Lee saying download the free Plug Share app if you want to see all the EV charging stations, and it shows the different types. There's all sorts of neat stuff happening. And then another comment from Jessica saying that we are only 7 city council elections away from 2050. That sort of feeds into what Grace was talking to us about. Okay, well, you know what? We're just about at the end of the show here, but maybe before we hang things up here, is there anything else that you want to communicate to our audience tonight? We'll just go around the room. David, is there anything? I want to make sure that everybody's had a chance to say everything that they want to communicate.
Yeah, right now is a fantastic time to look at a solar system. The federal government, through their Greener Homes grant, is offering up to $5,000, $1,000 a kilowatt as a grant, a rebate for the system. City of Calgary City Council has approved the SEEP program. I don't know exactly when it's coming out, probably this fall, I think. And we've heard rumor of a federal up to $40,000 interest-free loan for energy efficiency, solar, upgrading to a heat pump in the home, things like that. So there's a number of different ways to do it. The neat thing with the SEEP program, or the Clean Energy Rob, people call it
I
PACE.
forget if the I is incentive or
Incentive
improvement.
program.
It's one of the
improvement.
other.
I think it's improvement. The loan stays with the house. A lot of people say, "Oh, I don't want to put solar on my roof because it takes 10 or 15 years to pay for." But with the SEEP program, you pay your 5 years if you're going to move in 5 years, and it stays with the house, just like you would take a loan out to replace your sidewalk or pave the back lane. And so it doesn't follow you as the homeowner. Whereas the federal grant, if you want to do it that way, that loan will stay with you. So there's a number of different ways to finance these things. Most homeowners find it, today on a home line of credit, or we, get paid cash for it. So it's gotten so cheap, it's easy to buy.
Yeah, it's the best news that we can get on it. Grace, what about you? Anything else you want to communicate to our audience tonight?
Not anything specific, just that electrification and decarbonization of our grid are a really great opportunity to make improvements that are cost effective and also benefit our climate.
Fair enough. How about you, Andrew?
I saw some questions in chat, around cold
Yeah.
weather and EVs. Just want to touch on that real quick and clarify that there's definitely a range hit with EVs in cold weather. There's a range hit with gasoline cars in cold weather as well. You'll see, depending on the type of EV and the actual temperature, somewhere 20 to up to 50% range loss, which on the surface sounds a little scary. But when you're talking about EVs that are coming with 400 plus kilometers of range, very few people drive more than 200 kilometers a day. Especially on those super cold days. Most people kind of hibernate and don't want to get on the roads. So EVs are actually really good in our weather. They go the distance you typically need them to go, even with the range loss. They're starting with a full tank of gas, full charge every day, if you have home charging available to you. And they have some other benefits like instant heat or near instant heat. So being comfortable in the winter is super important. There was talk about what powers our grid, and Electric Vehicle Association of Alberta has put up a tool, the grid.albertaev.ca, that I encourage people to take a look at, and it will show you not only what's currently powering the grid. Earlier today, I took a look as we started our meeting, and it was 80% natural gas. As mentioned, it's not nearly as much as coal heavy as people think it is. The tool will also give you a calculator to compare the cost of gasoline and equivalent EV, both from a dollar perspective filling up as well as a emissions perspective.
Excellent. Rob, is there anything you'd like to communicate to our audience tonight?
Yeah, a couple things. I'll just add on to what Andrew said. As far as coal being off the grid, most of the coal is in Alberta is already off the grid. We have, in large part, our co-chair Dr. Joe Vipond, who, to thank for that, he was really active in the Alberta Coal Phase Out campaign. I really liked earlier, Grace said she was talking about being kind of active with politicians and just communicating how important it is for them to understand that decarbonizing electricity and electrification is important. And I think I'll just echo that. I think it is really important. I know a former guest that you've had on, Steve, Mark Jackard from SFU, in his book, one of the things that he really stresses is that it's really important to find climate sincere politicians and support them. And for people like I'm fairly involved in politics, but for people that aren't in it, it might seem like the election is far away, but it's very close. It's only a year away, and a year is basically like the campaign is essentially starting now. And for lots of the local candidates, they're actually campaigning already in nomination races to be the person on the ballot right now. So I think now is actually probably the perfect time if you want to find a politician in your area or in your city. You don't have to necessarily work in your riding, and you want to support them. From any party, the hub is nonpartisan. But if you find someone that is really great on climate, I think now's the right time to support them.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. So that's it for tonight's show. Again, I encourage our panelists tonight to remember each other's faces, and I hope that you end up being able to lean on each other on your shared initiatives. I'm starting to think about us all as being on this same quest, this same journey, and it was a big piece coming into place when our city said they're on that journey too. And so, I think it's more important than ever to think about how we can make sure we're not just working away by ourselves in our silos, and that we're able to pick up that phone and make that phone call. So one of the things I will do is make sure that you have each other's emails and you can reach out and chat like that. But I want to thank you so much for coming on the show tonight and sharing your expertise with us. We're trying to do what we see as our core goal of helping our city make this transition. And it's really important that we have smart people like you that can come on and explain things to us and explain things to our audience and help get the right tools in the hands of our city council. So thanks so much for coming on tonight. I may end up reaching out to you again for future shows. I think this is a great panel. I'm so glad to have you on. I want to thank Rob for helping me for co-hosting this event with me tonight. I defer to his wisdom on some of this stuff all the time. So that's tonight's show. I want to mention a few words about our sponsors that are helping to make this show possible. So Go Electric came up a few times tonight. They are the exclusive provider of used electric cars and plug-in hybrid vehicles for Calgary and beyond. They're pioneers in that field. I think it's fair to say. I can tell you that our co-chair went and gave a test drive for a Go Electric vehicle, ended up buying the thing, and she loves it. So it's a real success story there. And I know there's another hub member who's paying attention tonight who's thinking about reaching out to Go Electric, and I'm going to make sure they have that contact available to them. Our other sponsor is Solar Homes Incorporated. They're your net zero home renovation experts. They were the first CHBA labeled net zero renovation job in Canada. So when you're starting to think about turning that home into a net zero beauty, you should give Solar Homes Incorporated a call. And then, of course, SkyFire Energy, David Kelly. I'm so glad to have met you. I do consider you a pioneer in this field. That's what pioneers do. This is what a pioneer looks like. And just
lots of gray hair.
Yeah, that's part of the process.
Yeah.
But the vision of SkyFire is to bring the magic solar power to the world for a stronger, healthier, and more sustainable global community. Finally, I just want to do a quick pitch for the hub. In the pre-COVID days, maybe you'd go to an event and you'd see a great panel like this, and maybe it's something where you pay $5 or you pay $20 or what have you. We do take donations. It's critically important to our organization. I can say that climate is something of a tough dollar, has always been a tough dollar in this city. And so, you can go to calgaryclimatehub.ca and you can look at donating, and you can look at becoming a member there as well, or a volunteer. We're doing, I believe with all my heart, that we're doing some very important work in this city, and you should be a part of it. I give this particular spiel every show, but I'm going to do it again because I think it's important. If climate is something that gets you down, and the smoke is thick, or even if maybe there's something going on in the world right now that gives you a lot of stress. I don't know, is there something like that going on with you? It's really
people just got their electric bills for last month. That caused a lot of stress for a lot of people.
That's right, for sure. So if you want to clear out that anxiety, the only way I know how to do it is to sit around a table, either in the real world or digitally, with really smart people and work on solutions and work on getting those solutions in place. And that's what the Calgary Climate Hub does. And if you don't have the time for that, maybe you got some bucks to spare. We need every cent we can get. We need every bit of help we can. There's no bigger task than transitioning the world to where it's got to go. I want to thank the Calgary Climate Hub board and our many volunteers that help make this show happen. I want to thank my incredible producer, Vivian Elzinga. He's doing some great work in the background. And that's it for now. Good night for now, and let's get to work. Thanks again, panel. We'll talk soon.